Welcome in to the Action Network podcast. Great to be talking to you the week of the U.S. Open. Yes, the U.S. Open heading to the Country Club in Brookline, Massachusetts. First time the Country Club is hosting the U.S. Open since 1988. Here we go. Brendan Glasheen, your host today, joined by two of the very best that follow the PGA, that follow golf from a betting perspective. They are both co-hosts of the Better Golf podcast. Spencer Aguiar, he's at Tee Off Sports on Twitter. Nick Bretwisch, Sticks Picks, joining us as well. This same duo was with us for the Masters, and they were fantastic. So good to have both of you back in the mix here as we get set for the U.S. Open. Just want to start with some general thoughts, and Spencer, will go to you first. When you're looking to target a golfer, an outright winner, top 40, top 20, what are some factors for you when you look at the course? Weather looks like it's going to check out okay. Might be some inclement weather on Friday in Boston. But for the most part, when you look at all factors, what are some things here that jump out to you? And also approach, putting, how they do on the greens, driving the ball. What are some things that come to mind here as you prep for the U.S. Open?
Yeah, so let's talk about the course a little bit. It measures in at 7,264 yards, par 70 venue that falls somewhere between sadistic and overly complicated on the scale. That answer can sometimes place us on the fringe of a track that teeters between a proper test and one that is unfairly challenging. But the landscape of Brookline is masterfully pieced together, accentuating the course features and beautifully molding it into one diabolical examination. There are 70-foot trees that stymie second shots if you miss to the wrong angle, strategically placed bunkers and thick rough that prevent advancement, and sinister green complexes that not only rank as some of the smallest you will see all year, but also the trickiest for a few reasons. For starters, the two-tiered layout can create nightmarish speed on your putts, potentially causing balls to funnel off these false fronts that slope from back to front. But even more importantly than that, it will be an extension of the iron play since the green and regulation percentage will be significantly reduced. I have always found it challenging to create a US Open model that is vastly different from other users, since some semblance of the same statistics always come into play. We know that the players who tend to hit the ball the longest and the straightest for the weeks are the ones that are at a massive advantage, but it doesn't mean that we still can't get unique in our approach. To talk a little bit about the weather, I'm not a person that overly looks into weather stats. I think that things can change very frequently. When, you look 1 second, there's 25-mile-per-hour winds. You look the next day, and then all of a sudden, like what was forecasted is no longer there. So I like to just use my model, try to find an advantage there and go about it in that fashion.
Fair enough. I mean, Nick, you get the sense getting set here for the U.S. Open. Again, we'll get to best bets here momentarily. Just want to set the stage here for how Nick and Spencer go about handicapping and examining the landscape. It has been a while since the Country Club has hosted, like we talked about. But you get the sense placement over power will be the focus here with this course, because as Spencer laid out, if you miss, you might miss badly and hit Tom Brady's old house when he resided in New England. But short game, approach game, I think those two factors might be tested to the max here. Is that fair?
Yeah, certainly. I think for me, it's going to be short game. It's going to be ball striking, and certainly people that are deadly accurate off the tee, because we all know how high the rough is going to be at the U.S. Open, in addition to the fescue that is shortly, I think, knee high right outside the rough there.
Excellent. So let's kind of dive in now to best bets. And the great thing about Spencer and Nick here, when they come on and join us, it's not just, it's not a list of outright winners. They've got some pretty different ways to go about the betting board. Just to kind of lay it out, though, the favorites coming in, Rory McIlroy, who just won up in Canada, plus 1,000 leading on the board. Justin Thomas, John Rahm, your common customers at the top of the board for a big major in the golf circuit. So let's start with some top 40s. Spencer, we'll start with you. Who are some guys that jump out to you?
Yeah, so I like Aaron Wise top 40 at plus 100 on DraftKings. He's minus 140 on FanDuel. I didn't necessarily envision myself going into this weekend punching a plus 100 ticket on Wise to land inside the top 40. But my model had about 50 points of value on the wager at the price from a 2-year perspective. The long-term total usually means more to me since it allows the under the radar value to be found when the current form isn't being overly baked into the price. But it just so happens that the Oregon product jumps even higher on my model when we condense the data down to feature only the past 24 rounds. Wise ranks first in this entire field when we combine GIR percentage and long iron play. And the current form is starting to pop like we saw during portions of the 2021 season. I grabbed Harold Varner the third top 40, plus 115 FanDuel, minus 135 DraftKings. Varner's lack of perceived win equity is overly hurting him in most of these markets. And while there are concerns because of the volatility and random implosions that take place for him, the American places 21st overall in my model over the past 2 years. And we see him jump to an impressive 13th when running this from an upside perspective over the last 24 rounds. And then I'm going to let Nick talk about this a little bit also, because I know he likes this play, but Brian Harman, top 40, plus 165 FanDuel. Consider this more of a number grab than anything else. Harman has provided 4 top 38 finishes at the US Open during his last 4 attempts. And a lot of those showings were coming at venues where a lack of distance should have probably been a larger deterrent than he will experience at Brookline. The short game, reweighted proximity totals, and driving accuracy numbers are all inside the top 40 in this field. And he's also played tough courses historically well, which we see by him ranking 31st overall.
Yeah, Nick, taking a look at the Better Golf Pod Twitter, you demonstrated urgency to get in on Harman. Why?
Yeah, well, the price actually moved. So that plus 165 is now down to plus 145. So I know that when Spencer and I usually do our podcasts on Tuesday nights, if we think something's going to move, we want to get it out early. So that's what, following us on Twitter is some good value. I think last time I beat the market with Brian Harman by 30 points, he shot like a 90 the round one at the Charles Schwab, but then tore it up on Friday, but did miss a cut and did miss that bet. But yeah, Harman is probably one of my favorite plays. If it was still the plus 165 number, like Spencer said, it's 100% a number grab. My model's got him priced at plus 130, so about 35 points of value there. But he's just a deadly accurate fairway finder off the tee. His long iron play is very good, and like Spencer said, he's not long off the tee by any means, but he does handle himself very well on these long courses. He's got excellent U.S. Open history, and he is in really good form outside of the Charles Schwab round one there.
4 of his last 5 appearances on the tour, you take out the cut at Charles Schwab, he has finished top 40
yes, sir.
In that stretch. That's actually, and Spencer, we'll go to you, and then Nick can weigh in on this as well before we continue, because I know Nick has other top 40 plays, but I'm sure that this seems obvious, but this is important to highlight. Course history is important. How certain players fit the mold of the course, certainly important, but how much are you using recent history on this year in terms of how players are playing heading into this event? Because now we have enough of a sample size where enough has happened. I would think you'd want to be interested in golfers that are playing at a high level right now too.
Yeah, I run my model through a 2-year standpoint. So that's going to take 2021 stats and 2022 stats. Not to give away the entire, piece of the pie that I put together to make it work with it. But as of right now, it is going to be more of the 2022 stats than the 2021 stats that come into play. And another thing that I do too is I do have a weighted course history metric that I run. I have a weighted current form metric that I run. Now, obviously, we haven't been on this specific course in a long time, but as far as the recent form goes, that's 30% of my weight this week. I do have 10% on US Open venues over the last 5 years. And then 60% of my total came from a statistical analysis portion, which is just all the stats that I use to try to find an advantage.
Nick, how about you in terms of recent form? Because that would definitely relate to your Harman pick.
For the most part, for me, my model doesn't run anything longer than 120 days. So I kind of weight myself against Spencer's. I don't like to look at his model until mine is done, just because I don't want to be influenced by the genius that Spencer is. But yeah, I'm more of a recent form guy, as opposed to, there's a lot of course history nuts out there and stuff like that. But a guy like Brooks Koepka, who hasn't really threatened I guess he was really good at the Waste Management Open, but other than that, he's not the guy that we're used to seeing, but he always shows up at majors. I think he's a walking top 5 at the US Open, but for me, I haven't seen that elite level Brooks Koepka in a long time, and the recent data within 120 days really doesn't support playing him either, especially at his shorter prices. But to me, it's all about recent form.
Nick, give us some of your other top 40 plays for the US Open.
All right, my favorite one, and it hurts my stomach just to eat the juice on a top 40 market, but Daniel Berger top 40 is minus 115 on FanDuel. I believe that price is still live there. My price is down at minus 175. I believe the market even had a 195 there, I believe, on DraftKings, but my model absolutely loves the course fit here for Daniel Berger, who's usually just deadly accurate off the tee, excellent short game, excellent bunker play if he does mess up those approach shots, and his long iron ball striking is elite. So Daniel Berger is probably my favorite play overall in the DFS and betting market as a whole.
Okay, I think we're good. Top 40s. You guys got through those. I'm pretty sure at this stage. Very good. All right. So Spencer, you've got a unique angle before we get to some outright picks, but you've got a head-to-head that you like as well.
Yeah, so before I get into that, I always run my model to figure out the most mispriced golfers on the slate. For me, it's more important that I pinpoint fade candidates that I want to take on as opposed to golfers that I want to back. You can always find a way to get exposure in the outright or placement markets if worse comes to worse on a golfer that might be priced against other studs. But in my opinion, the biggest advantage comes from finding overvalued golfers that have inflated price tags. So to provide a little more context there, Billy Horschel, KH Lee, and Abraham Answer are the top 3 golfers on my model when it comes to being inflated in price. There are options you can consider at the legal books like Luke List minus 110 over Lee. Horschel has a few noteworthy opponents himself, but I'm going to go down to the 13th most overpriced golfer on the slate in Davis Riley as my favorite play on the board and take him on with the man of the week for me, Aaron Wise at minus 105. That number opened at plus 105 and has already moved 10 cents. So I would probably act quickly since I think we could see this climb by another 10 or 20 points before Thursday. But while Riley looks great with his 5 consecutive top 13 finishes, there will always be issues with plays like this since the recent results are being overly baked into the numbers. It doesn't mean he can't continue this trend since he has provided these results at both difficult and easy courses. But betting sports is always about finding the overcorrections to the market. I just found it interesting that Riley seemed to receive all the baked in totals here when Wise has been equally as good over the past few months. And that's before we even get to the long-term stats that begin to fully back Wise as a golfer that should be closer to minus 125 in this battle.
And Spencer, you're also in on a nationality prop.
I am. So, this is going to be an interesting wager. Anytime that you get these random props, you can kind of find some advantages. So the one I will give is Siwoo Kim to be the top South Korean golfer at plus 330. This is a 4-man contest. There's no arguing that Sungjae Im is the player to beat at minus 110. But my model is bearish on Joo-Hung Kim, a golfer that ranks 91st overall for me. It's also much lower, as I mentioned, on KH Lee, my 75th overall golfer. So while we are going to need some luck for Siwoo to get across the finish line over Sungjae, there's value to be had on the numbers since most markets have Siwoo as the 3rd choice of the group. I had this priced properly at plus 200, so I wouldn't be putting a large wager on it. But the hope is that my model is right about KH Lee and Joo-Hung Kim missing the cut, providing us a potential head-to-head battle at an inflated price.
Okay, and that transitions well to Nick because Siwoo Kim, Nick Bretwisch, is one of your outright picks.
Yeah, so Siwoo, I think it's more of a fanboy play for me, but like Spencer said, I mean, I love that pick that he has pretty much getting 3.5 to 1 on Siwoo heads up against Sungjae, assuming that the other two do miss a cut. But Siwoo Kim is 150 to 1 on DraftKings, and he is overall number 13 in my model in terms of overall course fit. I am a fanboy of Siwoo Kim. I think I bet him any chance I get when I see a plus number in the top 40 markets. I did punch the ticket there on FanDuel plus 150, but anytime that my model weights a very strong dependency on accuracy off the tee and very strong around the green play, Siwoo Kim is always going to pop for me. He's very good. The only downside for me, I had him priced at plus 110. So I do have 40 points of value on the outright ticket there. I would like Siwoo a little bit more. Had there been more than 2 par 5s on this venue, that seems to be where Siwoo really does his damage. But with the accuracy off the tee, this is just a price grab for a player that I personally love all the time.
In terms of your other outright winners, you've got 2 names at the top of the board. The 6th favorite, Patrick Cantlay, and then going down just a little bit more, Colin Morikawa. Why don't you make a case why each of those guys are 2 you're targeting?
So outside of Rory, my model pretty much thinks all these top, 12 golfers in the market are pretty much a toss-up. So for Colin, I know he finished fourth last year. I believe it was a tie with Brooks. I think he's just due to win a U.S. Open soon. He really hasn't done a whole lot this year, but he is deadly, deadly, deadly accurate off the tee. One of the best long iron ball strikers in this field. He certainly has his putting issues, but that's really not going to be a case here with, I believe, the smallest or second smallest greens on tour. He is one of the best par 4 scoring players in my model as well. And Cantlay, really just the exact same thing, a little more positive in the bogey avoidance than Colin Morikawa, but excellent par 4 scoring. And again, very accurate off the tee and great around the green. So to me, it was just getting more inflated prices for guys that my model think are equal to, not necessarily a Scotty Scheffler, but guys just right below him.
Okay, a couple picks. And Spencer, why don't you, kind of take us home here in terms of targeting outright winners? You kind of hit on this briefly, but what exactly is your general strategy, or what would you address to folks that are getting involved in a major? If they're just someone who's casually getting involved in a major, wants to bet on it, general strategy to picking an outright.
Yeah, so I think there's a general misconception about outrights, and major championships only heighten that point I'm about to make. I will give a play or two to consider, since I know these boards will fluctuate between now and Thursday, but more so than touting a wager that has moved in value, I would like to talk a little bit about the advantage that you can get in the market in general. So I always say that by the time the board reopens on the Monday before the tournament, and this would be for major championships, any of the value is gone, since most books will shade their hold percentage. That's an answer for another show when we have more time, but it's essential to be patient and let the books start to favor you again. It will always be better if you can lock up most of your outright card weeks or even months before these majors take place. But assuming that either isn't something you want to do or can't do for whatever reason, my biggest piece of advice for everyone listening is to have patience during these weeks. There is such a rush from most to lock up their cards after the board retakes form on Monday that users miss the battle from shops inflating their outright prices in certain areas to secure the last few dollars. I do have a ticket on Max Homa that I like at 66 to 1. There is a Cantlay outright that I am on at 30 to 1. I don't know how much good that does anyone listening now, since the numbers have changed on those two. I still think there's value to be had if you wait or shop around, but the two I'll give on this show, which are two plays that I have mentioned multiple times, I will start with Harold Varner at 100 to 1. He gets a bad rap because of his inability to close out events on tour. Now, I understand asking him to do it in a major seems far-fetched, but my model has Varner as a 66 to 1 golfer that is being priced at 100 to 1. And then the second choice is Aaron Wise. I have each of them as top 13 targets in this field when I run the event for upside over a shorter term sample size than I typically use. And while it's hard to imagine either winning a major at this points of their career, we've seen them recently in fields that are not much different than this at sub 50 to 1. Very quickly, I've used this example multiple times this week, but Wise and Varner aren't that much different than Mito Pereira, who was one tee shot away on 18 from capturing the PGA Championship. And I know the natural answer to that would be that he didn't win, but we can look at a golfer like Gary Woodland at the 2019 US Open or Keegan Bradley at the PGA Championship in 2011 and point to similar golfers where it would have seemed outlandish for them to win until it happened. Those victories changed the trajectory towards their careers. And I don't think it's inconceivable that we could see Wise or Varner accomplish a similar outcome at a very generous price of 100 to 1.
Excellent. Love it. Both co-hosts from the Better Golf podcast, Spencer Aguiar, Nick Bretwisch. Gents, anything else you got to get off your chest here before we go? This is great stuff.
No, I mean, I want to thank you guys again for having us on. First off, you can find me on Twitter at TOF Sports. You can locate the two of us together at Better Golf Pod. And I just really hope that everyone listening will tune into our show. Nick and I always try to attack the board in a unique and mathematical fashion. And I think it provides an entertaining podcast where we try to help everyone get more tickets to the window.
You got anything, Nick?
No, thanks for having us and good luck, everybody. And one last pick, I believe, would be Hideki Matsuyama, 40 to 1 on FanDuel. I think he's my actual pick to click this week. And my winner, if I had a one and done pool, is going to be Hideki Matsuyama, as long as he does not paint his 3-wood again.
Okay. Excellent. Great work from both of you guys, Spencer and Nick, helping us out here on the Action Network podcast. For other golf, US Open Action Network content, look forward to the Links and Locks podcast from the Action Network. That is also coming this week. For Spencer Aguiar, Nick Bretwisch, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for tuning in. Best of luck, everybody, and enjoy the golf. We'll talk to you again very soon.